Have you ever considered the depth of the impact that domestic violence can have on a person's life? It's a question that's unfortunately all too relevant in our society. Domestic violence, a pervasive issue, doesn't discriminate. It seeps into households across the world, affecting individuals from all walks of life. The scars it leaves are not just physical, but deeply emotional and psychological, often reverberating through generations. The harsh reality is that for many, these acts of violence are not isolated incidents but a relentless cycle, a chilling pattern of abuse that escalates over time. The gravity of this issue is profound, and it's crucial that we not only understand it, but actively work towards addressing it. Today, we delve into a harrowing story that exemplifies this very issue. Our story begins in Detroit, with a woman named Tiffany Joseph. A vibrant soul of 32 years, Tiffany was caught in a tumultuous and dangerous relationship with a man named Billy Ray Cromer. 40 years old and carrying a dark intent, Billy Ray Cromer was not a stranger to the harsh side of the law. In the year 2020, Tiffany found herself at the receiving end of an unspeakable act of violence perpetrated by Billy. The incident was so severe that it led to charges of assault with intent to do great bodily harm, torture, and felonious assault being levied against Billy. The narrative of this assault is a harrowing one, with Tiffany, then pregnant, enduring a brutal attack that tragically ended her pregnancy. This assault was not an isolated incident but a part of a pattern, a disturbing thread in their relationship. Billy Cromer was accused of choking Tiffany, punching her repeatedly, and forcing her to consume unknown prescription pills. This brutal event marked a chilling prelude to what was to come. This incident was only the beginning of a tragic story. On October 21, 2020, an event occurred that would change Tiffany's life forever. That night, Billy Cromer, with whom Tiffany shared a home, unleashed a wave of brutal attacks on her. The violence was shocking, even by the grim standards of domestic abuse cases. Billy Cromer is accused of storming into their shared residence and launching a merciless assault on Tiffany. The assault began with Billy grabbing Tiffany by the neck, his fingers tightening into a chokehold. But it didn't end there. Billy then proceeded to pummel Tiffany, his fists raining down on her in a relentless barrage. He targeted her stomach and her head, the blows landing with sickening force. As the assault continued, Tiffany tried desperately to shield her stomach, hoping to protect the life growing inside her. But Billy Cromer was unrelenting. In a terrifying escalation, he forced Tiffany to swallow several unknown prescription pills. The motive behind this act remains unclear, but the outcome was tragically unequivocal. Later that night, Billy Cromer took Tiffany to a hospital. The details of what transpired in the hospital are shrouded in the shadows of that horrific night. But one heartbreaking fact emerged. Tiffany's pregnancy was no longer viable. The life that had been growing inside her, the life she had tried so desperately to protect, was lost. In the aftermath of this brutal attack, Billy Cromer was charged with assault with intent to do great bodily harm, torture, and felonious assault. Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy described the case as among the worst she had seen in her career, noting that the office had been presented with well over 30,000 domestic violence warrants in just the last 5 years. Despite this horrifying ordeal, Tiffany's story was far from over. The nightmare was just beginning, and the events that were about to unfold would send shockwaves through the community and beyond. Fast forward to July 2022, and another horrifying event unfolds. On the evening of July 4th, a sinister plan was allegedly set into motion. Billy Ray Cromer, Tiffany Joseph's ex-boyfriend, is accused of orchestrating a deadly plot against her. The man chosen to execute this chilling act was none other than Spencer Lewis Cromer III, an 18-year-old who, according to police, was directly asked by Billy to commit the heinous crime. The following day, at precisely 11 minutes past 11, the police were called to a house on Rosemont Avenue in Detroit. There they found Tiffany Joseph, only 32 years old, lifeless. She had been shot multiple times, the brutality of the act leaving no room for survival. The charges against Billy Cromer and Spencer Lewis Cromer were swiftly laid out. Billy, already facing charges of assault from the 2020 incident, was now accused of an even more grave crime: premeditated first-degree murder. Spencer, on the other hand, was charged with the same, along with an additional count of felony firearm. The details of the case paint a grim picture of manipulation and violence, with Billy Cromer at the center. His history of violent behavior, his alleged orchestration of the murder plot, and his attempt to distance himself from the act by involving the young Spencer Cromer, all contribute to a chilling narrative. As for Spencer Lewis Cromer, the charges against him suggest he was not merely a pawn in Billy's plan. His involvement in the act, his willingness to carry out the murder, and his alleged acceptance of Billy's request all point to a disturbing disregard for life. A tragic end to a life marred by violence. In the aftermath of Tiffany's death, the community and justice system were left to grapple with the realities of what had occurred. The brutal murder shook the city of Detroit, leaving residents in shock and grief. Tiffany was not just a statistic, she was a beloved member of her community, a daughter, a friend, and a mother-to-be. The loss was deeply felt, and the impact reverberated through the city streets. The justice system, too, felt the weight of Tiffany's tragedy. Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy released a statement that resonates with us all. This office has been presented with well over 30,000 domestic violence warrants in just the last 5 years. I can unequivocally say that alleged facts on this case are among the worst I have seen. Her words are a chilling reminder of the grim reality many people face behind closed doors. Domestic violence is a pervasive issue, not only in our society but across the globe. It lurks in the shadows, often unseen and unheard until it's too late. Tiffany's story is a tragic example of how domestic violence can escalate, leading to unthinkable consequences. In reflecting on this case, we must remember that domestic violence is not just a personal issue, but a societal one. It affects us all, whether directly or indirectly. It is a cycle of abuse that can span generations and infiltrate communities, leaving a trail of trauma and heartbreak in its wake. We must also remember that victims of domestic violence are not alone. There are resources available, organizations willing to help, and people who care. It's essential to reach out, to speak up, and to break the silence that so often surrounds domestic violence. Tiffany's story is a stark reminder of the devastating effects of domestic violence. Tiffany's story is not an isolated one, and it's time to take a stand. Domestic violence is a silent epidemic that affects countless lives every day. In the United States alone, an average of 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner. That's more than 10 million men and women each year. These staggering numbers barely scratch the surface of the emotional, psychological, and financial abuse often accompanying the physical violence. It's time we change the narrative. Let's educate ourselves about the signs of domestic violence and its devastating impact. It's not just the physical scars but the invisible wounds that can last a lifetime. Understanding is the first step towards making a difference. Supporting victims is crucial. Domestic violence shelters, hotlines, and advocacy groups need our help. Whether it's volunteering, donating, or simply spreading awareness, every action counts. But perhaps the most significant change comes from speaking out against domestic violence. Silence perpetuates these atrocities, but our voices can bring them to light. If you witness or suspect domestic violence, don't hesitate to report it. It might just save a life. This isn't just about Tiffany, or the countless other victims whose stories we may never hear. It's about creating a world where violence is not tolerated, where victims are supported and heard, and where abusers face justice. Together we can make a difference. Stand against domestic violence. Let Tiffany's story be a catalyst for change.